So, hi, I am Amy. I've been doing some emailing along with Win. I'm a writing and editing intern for Pine Reads Review. I'm helping Win out with the interview. So I'll pass it on to Win.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm an editing intern at Pine Reads Review. And I really enjoyed Jestin Kase and Masters of Dragon Metal.
Thank you.
Sorry, my cat is on my lap right now.
No problem. After 2 going on 3 years of Zoom meetings for everyone, cats in the shot are pretty normal. So.
Okay.
All right, so
go ahead.
All right, so we're just going to go ahead and get started then with our interview here. So our first question that we had for you was, what inspired you to become an author or a writer?
It's just something that writing is always something that I've done. Even when I was a little kid, I remember, in first grade watching He-Man, and then I would write little He-Man stories in a notebook. So I've always written fiction to some extent. Then in college, I needed a job, and my friend worked for the newspaper. Indiana State University is where we went. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come work for us?" And I did, and then I kind of fell in love with journalism, and I did that for about 10 years. It wasn't until COVID, though, that I really took the time to sit down and focus on writing like a novel to actually publish. I had about 2 spare hours a day with not having to commute to work, and I kind of used that time to focus on writing. So there you have it.
What inspired Dragon Metal, if anything?
So it was inspired by, most recently, the idea was Oliver Twist, but with demons. I just like the idea of kind of modernizing that story of just an orphan living in today's times and the struggles that he goes through, but with a whole bunch of fantasy elements and fun action adventure stuff added onto it. There are a lot of story ideas that I've had sitting in the back burner for years that I kind of pulled off the shelf and incorporated into the book. A lot of Babylonian mythology. The concept of the book deals with the concept of these 3 great schools of magic that were supposed to protect the world from the Great Dark. That's a story idea I had years and years ago. So I kind of took that Oliver Twist idea and I built on it with a whole bunch of other stuff.
If you could give yourself advice, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to the person you were before writing this book?
I would probably tell that person to not worry about whether the book will be a commercial success. Just write a story that you would want to read. What's the story you want to tell? What are the themes? Focus on that. Hammer it out and just go. Don't edit while you go. Don't worry about any of those things. Just put words onto the page until it's finished. And then afterwards, that's when you can worry about editing. And when the book is done, then you can worry about marketing and all of that. But just write the book that you want to read, I think, is the best advice I would give to myself.
So I've heard there's usually 2 schools of thought when it comes to writing. There's the growers and the architects. So people who create characters first and people who create plot first. Are you a grower, an architect, or both, or neither? How does that work for you?
That's a very good question. I'm more of a grower. I do kind of put together a preliminary plan. It's very basic. I'll list each character, a few notes on the characters. I'll talk a little bit in my notes about where I want the story to go, just for a few paragraphs. But mostly, I think the story works best when it tells itself. So, for example, in the story that was published, there's a cat that's very prominent, and he's been praised in all of the early reviews. I think people like him more than anything else in the book. But originally, he wasn't going to be in the story. He just kind of plopped onto the page and evolved. And there are a couple of villains in the book that did that as well that weren't necessarily planned. They just kind of happened. So the growing aspect of writing is always fun, and I think that's when the story really works best, is when it kind of evolves on its own. But at the same time, you do have to have an idea of where you're going and what you're wanting to hit on with the narrative.
Speaking of Hiss, who I really liked, do any of the characters have any special meaning to you?
They all do to some extent. I know Jestin is kind of an amalgam of just a bunch of kids that I've known who have actually been in the foster care system from my journalism days. There was a place I worked for. Well, I volunteered there. It was for At Rescue at the place where I went to college. And there was a kid in particular that I kind of looked to when I was crafting Justin's character. But each of them also just has an aspect of me. For example, there's a secondary character called Colt, who's a journalist, and he doesn't, he's an old school journalist. He doesn't care about clicks or views. That's something that's straight from me. I think even some of the adult supporting characters, now that I'm older, there's some of me in them as well. So pretty much all of them. The only exception is one of the main villains. His name is Appleson. He just kind of appeared in a very creepy way. Like, I didn't plan on having him in the story or give much thought to him. He just kind of started showing up and causing trouble. So other than him, all the other ones I would say are kind of special in some way.
What was your favorite part of the book to write? Do you have a favorite scene?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I really like the opening scene where the book kind of starts when Justin is on the run from police. He's being chased. What I like about that first scene is it tells you a lot about the world that it's set in. It tells you a lot about Justin as a person, but it doesn't do so in a wordy or extravagant way. It's pretty straightforward. And I spent a lot of time getting that part of the story right at the beginning. For the longest time, it opened with the scene of him. He had already been caught by the police and he was in an interrogation room, but I could never get that to work. Once I took him out of that interrogation room and kind of backed up and he was running from police, that's when the story really started moving. So I really like the first scene just for that reason, I would say.
How many books do you have planned for this series?
7.
It's a good number.
It was going to be.
It's a good number.
Yeah, it was going to be 6, but then the second book, which I finished the rough draft and my editor is taking a look at it now, that originally wasn't going to be a book in and of itself. I've kind of split the second book into book 2 and book 3. So it's already grown by 1. Who knows what'll happen as we move forward. But there are some short stories I want to put out there. I'm not quite sure what form those will take. If it'll be like a short story collection or maybe just something I post online. But the main story of Justin and his journey is going to be around 7.
There are so many details in Dragon Metal from so many different beliefs. I was really interested by all of the care you put into it. How long did it take you to research all this, and what's your writing process like?
So it took a couple of years. A lot of the background and world building I started back when I was in college. So years and years ago, not to date myself. But a lot of times what I'll do when I'm world building is I'll just kind of get an idea in my head of just what do I want the background to be? Do I want it to be modern, kind of today's world, or something more fantastical? This was in today's world in Chicago, so it was pretty easy. Didn't have to do a lot of research for that. But then in terms of building the magic system, I just read a lot. I knew I wanted to pull from kind of Sumeria and Babylonian mythology, just because at the time, I didn't really see a lot of that in literature or on TV even. So I looked online for some books that I could really dig into, and I ordered a whole bunch, and I would basically just start reading through those, take notes while I read, and then I have an outline page where I would kind of put together okay, these are each of the three schools. Here's a little bit about each of them. Here's the bad guys. Here's some demons that work for the bad guys. And I would just kind of write all of that out. I probably have like 500 pages of background material that I'll be pulling from as the series goes along. The first book really only scratches the surface, I think. But I'm proud of the world building. I'm very grateful to the people who have read the book already and given me positive feedback about that. That's very humbling because it did take a lot of work to put all that together.
Speaking of, do you have any favorite parts of Babylonian myth?
I think just all of it. That's such a cop-out answer. I really like. I like the story of he was mentioned in book one, I think, but Marduk and just how he kind of overthrew the old gods and kind of brought about this pantheon of new gods. I like his story a lot. There was a very early draft of Dragon Metal, like probably a decade ago, where Marduk was actually kind of a main character, but that didn't end up working out. But I like his story is really interesting to me. I also like how when you look at what happened to a lot of the old gods in Babylonian mythology, they were kind of adapted by Christianity and kind of turned into demons or demonic figures as history went forward. That was really interesting, and I'll be kind of looking back on that more as the series moves forward too. So there's just a lot of untapped potential back there, I think.
Yeah, it sounds really, really interesting. It kind of inspired me to do a little digging myself, so thank you for that. And just one last question to wrap up the interview. Are there any hints we can get about book two?
Hints about book two. So I think it's a lot more character driven, and I think Jestin will have come a long way from book one, but he's kind of facing new challenges that come from getting what he wanted in book one. He kind of got what he wanted in book one. Now he's kind of paying the consequences of that, and it's not going to go as swimmingly as he may have hoped. So more challenges, lots more action. I'm trying to make it cinematic, kind of like the first book was. I think people will, if you like the first book, you'll like the second one. So I'm excited to have it out there once it's time, which will be, book two will be in 2023, so about a year from now.
Thank you so much for meeting with us this morning. I think that's about it that we have for questions. I really appreciate you taking the time and talking with us today.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate you reaching out. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.